electrolyte their car to travel farther on a single charge. Lucky for us all, many scientists are developing better batteries right now. One electrode to another through a liquid light. Electrolyte. The first step in making battery electrodes is mixing a batter-like slurry. PNNL scientists batterizing a battery. The first step in making battery The first step in making battery electrodes is mixing a batter-like slurry. PN batter-like slurry. PNNL scientists are exploring many different electrode materials, such as lithium, sulfur, sodium, and magnesium. They can make batteries sulfur and electrode materials, such as lithium, sulfur, sodium, and magnesium. They can make batteries more efficient.
Quiet, mailbox. I'm not gonna watch videos for 20 hours.
Next. Electrolyte.
Alright, since he's pouring this onto aluminum sheeting, then this is the cathode. Because the anode gets put onto copper sheeting.
Goo is spread and bake.
Note how this is not an oxygen-free room. So this stuff can come in contact with oxygen. So when you saw that mixing machine being all sealed off and everything, that wasn't necessary because, as you can see, this solution can be exposed to oxygen. Oh, maybe they sealed it off because they were feeding in the binder? Because he just poured the powder and then closed it. Maybe the hoses leading to that mixing machine added the binder and the carrier. That could be. And it could mix it for a long time in order to connect the binder and carrier to the functional material. Oh wow, notice how he's manually pushing it down that ramp he poured it on. He's manually pushing it toward the rollers. The width of the ramp is determining the width of the pour. Note that the aluminum foil feeding through is very shiny. It doesn't look scuffed up, but you wouldn't think it'd have a coating though to prevent oxidation, because that coating would prevent good electrical contact with the cathode paste. I imagine this rolling should be very slow to ensure good coverage of the cathode paste onto the roll. Oh, I just realized something else. Note how this cylinder here is actually coated just as much as this roll that's coming up through the right side. This cylinder here is coated just as much as the roll that's coming up through the right side of the screen. So this cylinder has this ramp coming down onto it, and he's pushing it with this metal stick. He's pushing the fluid into the corner, urging it down the ramp because it's quite thick. It's very high viscosity. It's like a honey. He's pushing it down to make sure this roller gets well coated and stays wet. And then this roller is pressed up against this other roller in the back here. And this one's rolling counterclockwise. This roller is rolling clockwise. and they're feeding up and through aluminum foil. The cathode paste, because cathode paste goes onto aluminum, is being applied to one side of the aluminum foil. For a process where you're going to create a jelly roll for an 18650 cell, you would need to apply the cathode paste to both sides. Now I think for that you could just feed the aluminum through this contraption a second time, but flipped around. But they're going to make in this video a lithium pack, which is a soft pouch. So they don't have to worry so much about coating both sides. They're just going to probably coat the top, then put their separator layer with the electrolyte in it, and then put their copper coated with graphite layer. Now note that this cathode paste would be something like lithium iron phosphate powder, which you can buy in bulk, mixed with an electrical conductive additive or filler, such as carbon nanoparticles or graphite, which is the same thing, graphite powder at 20% mixture ratio of that to the actual lithium iron phosphate, and that just creates like little tentacles of electrical conductivity to make sure that it's conducting down and into the aluminum well, despite being coated in the binder, which is like a plastic, and the binder would be PVDF, polyvinylidene fluoride. And then the carrier, the binder is like the glue, the plastic that holds the powder together so it can dry as a paste and not just flake off. The carrier would be N-methyl-2-pyrrolidone, NMP. And I was able to actually find that on eBay. It's a paint stripper, as a paint stripper. So that will evaporate during the baking process. They're going to bake this next. So that evaporates, just leaving your binder, your electrically conductive filler slash additive, which would be your graphite slash carbon nanoparticles mixed at 10%. Actually, your binder slash glue is only supposed to be 1 to 2%. Your NMP carrier is just mixed until in the percentage you need to make the paste the viscosity you want. Hi Mike. So it doesn't really matter how much, because in the baking process it evaporates away anyways. So that's just a matter of feel and testing. But 1 to 2% for the binder compared with lithium iron phosphate or whatever your material is. It could also be NMC or NCA, which are popular battery chemistries for electric vehicles that Tesla uses. Those are the shorthand versions. Of those chemical compounds that are lithium compounds. You can look those up. I'm trying to see what they are. NMC. NCA and NMC. Okay, NMC, the more stable, longer lifetime preferred of the two, is lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt oxide. Oh, that's good to know. Because it's an oxide, I think that's why it's okay to expose it to air, because it already has oxygen molecules as part of the compound. So if you expose it to air, it's not going to suddenly have oxygen flying at it to attach to itself. It's already got oxygen as part of the compound. Lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt oxide. So anyways, that's why it's stable. So you mix in your 1 to 2% binder. Again, that's PVDF. And you mix in your carrier, which is NMP, and you mix your lithium compound, and now you feed it onto this downward ramp into a pair of rollers who feed your aluminum foil through, applying it in a thin, even coating onto the aluminum foil prior to baking. Now, one of my questions is, if you buy aluminum foil like Reynolds Wrap from the grocery store, that will have a thin protective coating like a plastic on it. So I'd be concerned about the electrical conductivity resistance that would create. So I'm interested to know if you would need to somehow strip that off prior to using standard aluminum foil. Now I know that major battery supplier websites do sell the aluminum foil and the copper foil, and they'll probably already have whatever coatings on them removed that would be preventing proper flow of the paste electricity onto the metallic plates. Libgroup.net and targray.com both sell battery making materials. But you can also buy them right off eBay. It's just not the best selection of sellers. There's not a lot of people selling it because not a lot of people buy it from eBay. Most people would buy it in bulk because not a lot of DIYers are doing this at this time. But I hope that education on how it's made, how cells can be made at home, will change that, because that can cut down the cost for people like me who want to get cells but they don't want to pay $3 or $4 per cell. And just buying all the raw materials, it could be a lot cheaper. Okay, so you've got your cathode paste and your metallic current collector that will transfer the current to the output terminals. Your cathode paste sends off electrons because of the active lithium in it, sends them off. So it would be the negative terminal. It oxidizes. Your anode paste, which they never show them making that or applying that, is what reduces. it receives those electrons, and in receiving negative electrons, it sends positive current the other way. So it's the positive terminal. If you send off negative, you receive the positive current. So that's why the cathode is the negative terminal, because it's receiving the positive current while sending the negative electrons in the opposite direction. And you can verify that that's how current electron flow works by looking up the definition of current. So yeah, he's feeding it down this ramp, and it's then getting sucked up by this roller, which coats this roller, and then this roller smashes it in a thin, smooth layer onto the sheet, which is being fed through, because this roller and this roller are rolling in opposite directions, feeding this aluminum through. Now, it's possible that they could even be using these rollers to thin out the aluminum at some point, but definitely not here, because it can't be smashing the aluminum so much that it's smashing this paste. Or maybe it is, who knows? Maybe the aluminum is wider than these two rollers combined, and these rollers are actually crushing and forming the aluminum from aluminum ingots. That'd be interesting, but I doubt it. Because look at the uniform width. If it was smashing it from ingots, you would think the width would be not so uniform, because they would need to cut it after that. That's just my guess. So yeah, you can buy all these materials online. Obviously aluminum, and then the lithium compound you can buy pre-made. You don't have to buy lithium ingots and manganese, or is it manganese? Lithium, nickel, manganese, and cobalt. Yeah, you don't have to buy lithium, nickel, manganese, and cobalt and somehow make that into lithium, manganese, nickel, cobalt oxide. You don't have to do that. You don't have to be a chemist to do this. You buy that compound pre-made, and they'll sell it to you from these battery supplier websites. Okay, so you would need to coat the front and back side of this aluminum. Which I can show you why here. Okay, so this aluminum will be rolled up to make one of these cells. And when it's rolled up, it needs to be in a certain order. You can actually buy, this is a screenshot from a supplier website that I found of these actual cells. You can buy this and make your own. You just have to crimp these tops onto these tubes after you put your jelly roll in. The jelly roll is the electrodes rolled up. And you can see this is a jelly roll being unrolled. This copper that's fully exposed had its anode coating removed onto the separator layer because it was fully discharged in an older battery. That's why it's not sticking to the copper, but it would be sticking to the copper when you actually made it. So that's misleading, seeing the bare copper exposed like that. It wouldn't be exposed. Okay, now you can see this is how it is. So here is separator, negative electrode, positive electrode. Now, as we discussed, they're making in the video right now the negative electrode. So that will be this layer. So the positive electrode is on the inside when you start rolling it up. then comes a separator layer, then comes the negative electrode, which is the aluminum cathode, and then comes another separator. The aluminum cathode is being made right here. It needs to be coated on front and back sides. The positive electrode is the anode. It's made of copper foil instead of aluminum foil, which is always, the cathode's always aluminum foil coated in cathode paste. The anode is copper foil coated in carbon. And by carbon, that is graphite. Graphite is made up of carbon atoms, so it's either referred to as graphite or carbon. Now, that graphite is crushed into a powder. You can use activated carbon / graphite, which is basically coal. A lot of times they use, I guess, burned coconut hair to make that, but I believe any coal would work. But I think that the purity is important. So I plan to just buy the carbon directly from the battery materials making supplier. However, I think it would be good to test activated charcoal if it's a lot cheaper, purchased for like fish tank filter cleaning, to grind that up with a mortar and pestle or with metal balls in a shaker device that crushes it into a fine powder, and then compare the two. I think that would be a good move to see if you can actually cut costs by buying it from a cheaper source, or even just taking charcoal and crushing that into a powder. So that would be worth exploring. But to start out making your first battery, in order to maximize potential for success, I would say just buy the copper and aluminum foils directly from the battery making supplier, and buy your graphite / carbon crushed into a fine powder from the battery making supplier for your positive electrode. So anyways, this is how the positive electrode's made. They do not show it in this video, which is disappointing. It would be made through the same machine and the same process of applying it, except you'd feed copper foil through here. And that copper foil will be coated in that crushed graphite / carbon, crushed into a fine powder. And the same way of making the paste, this is cathode paste, to make the anode paste is the same thing. You need your functional material, which in this case is the graphite / carbon. You need your binder, which is the glue, and it happens that you can use the same binder as you used for the cathode paste. So you can use PVDF, which you can buy. It comes as a powder. It's a type of plastic, and it's the perfect binder. It's the most common used binder for lithium ion batteries. And then you use your carrier, which is basically paint stripper that will flash off when you bake it. So it's only used to liquefy the paste into a liquid form before it dries and evaporates out after it's been applied to your metallic collector, which in this case for the anode would be copper foil. You can use a hair dryer to bake it, or you can put it in an oven at 125 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't take long for it to flash off the paint stripper. And the paint stripper, as I said, is NMP, N-methyl 2-pyrrolidone. Okay, and you can buy that right off eBay. Now, 1 to 2% binder, which is the glue / plastic, in powder form, you mix with your crushed graphite / carbon, and you mix that with your paint stripper, which is NMP. The amount of NMP doesn't matter because it's going to flash off anyways. You just mix it until it's a good viscosity, a good flow. And then you brush it on. You could even brush it on with the paintbrush. You do not need to use this fancy roller machine to apply it. An artist brush would be fine. You could probably even spray it on with an automotive sprayer gun. But, I mean, that would waste a lot, and it's expensive stuff, so you probably wouldn't want that. It'd just be blowing everywhere. So yeah, 1 to 2% binder compared to 98% graphite. Same percentages apply to the cathode paste as the anode paste. Now, you want to apply the binder to the inside, not that binder, the anode paste to the inside and outside of the copper foil. You want to apply the cathode paste to the inside and outside of the aluminum foil here. Okay, that way when it's rolled up, the inside of this one hits the outside of this separator, which then goes to this side, the right side of the cathode. The left side of the cathode goes through this separator and hits the right side of the anode. So the left side of the anode goes through this separator, hits the right side of the cathode. Left side of the cathode goes through this separator, hits the right side of the anode. So these then, when rolled up, kind of create like 2 battery sandwiches in one. And you just keep rolling it and rolling it, so each one becomes like a little battery going to the next one. And you can verify that. Here's the assembly of the battery cell. This was the original patent from Samsung. Probably ancient. You can verify that here. Separator, graphite, copper, graphite, the anode, graphite, copper, graphite. So that's verifying that the copper foil, which is the copper current collector, is coated on both sides with your anode composite film. Then another separator, then cathode film, aluminum cathode film. So that verifies everything I've been saying. It's an 8-layer stack which repeats because you're rolling it over and over and over, with the copper side on the innermost. The aluminum wraps around that. So you start off by rolling this side down, and this side's out. The aluminum side's out. Now, the negative tap will connect to the negative terminal of your cell. The positive tap, which comes out the center, will connect to the positive terminal. And you can see right here, this is the positive tap coming out. This rubber seal prevents this positive terminal from touching the outer case. The outer case has the negative tap, which is right here, touching it. So the whole outside is negatively live. So this copper separates it, otherwise it's short. If you were to bend this shell down further to touch this metal plate here, it would short out. You'd see a spark. So that's important. There is a metal rod that you use to start wrapping these into a ball. I'm not sure if that's necessary or not. You'd have to read this patent to see the explanation behind this rod, which is part 13. So anyways, yeah, this video fails to show all of those things because they make it just as a sandwich without rolling it into a ball, so they don't have to coat both sides necessarily, I think. Because they're just going to have the aluminum, separator, and then copper, and then they might just stack it multiple times thick like that. Because you're not rolling it into a ball, you don't have to have it on both sides like that. They can just face upward for each layer. Well, no, this layer would face upward, then would come the separator, then the copper foil layer would face downward with its anode paste. The main thing is that the anode paste has to face the separator, and the cathode paste has to face the separator, and the ions can travel through, and the reaction can happen. Okay, so yeah, that covers pretty much everything. That's how you'd make a soft pack, is by just stacking these, and they'll be rectangular in final shape, and you can just seal it off in an aluminum pouch at the end. For the 18650, you'd be rolling these, so you need to coat both sides and have separator, and then the copper coated both sides as well, and roll it all up. Oh, you can see that they're feeding it directly into the oven after that. Now note that the thickness of this looks like, well, based on the width of his hand, it looks like maybe 2.5 hand widths. So maybe like 8 inches thick. But if you buy sheets of aluminum and copper from a battery supplier, usually they make them 60 millimeters in width, and I believe that's the width of a 18650 cell. So they sell them usually in the width required to make 18650s, which is how most battery cells end up being made to that form factor. It's a very standard form factor. So you probably wouldn't get it in this size. But maybe you could source, though, or make your own foil of a bigger size. Obviously, aluminum foil from the store would be the wider size. But like I said, with whatever coatings they put on that to prevent oxidation, I don't know if it would work. You might have to, like, scuff it up thoroughly in order to get rid of that coating and access the pure aluminum underneath. I'm not sure. Like with a Brillo pad or a wire brush, which could be part of an automated process, just scuffing to get rid of oxidation and blow that off, exposing pure aluminum to put this paste onto. So that would be an option, I guess. I don't know if there's a chemical way to do it too. So that's feeding into the oven. Okay, it's coming out the other end of the oven baked. You can see the change in color. The NMP carrier, or the paint stripper aspect, has flashed off. During that baking, they probably vent that out to the outdoors. And again, it bakes at 125 degrees Fahrenheit. Electrodes stamping. So this part, normally for an 18650 cell, you wouldn't need to cut it any more than just the width of one cell, which might be, I don't know, a few feet. You'd have to determine that based on rolling one up and seeing how much you roll it in order to still get it to fit into your cylinder. And then once you get the exact length, that's the maximum amount of rolls you can fit into your cylinder, then that would be where you cut it off at. Now they're going to be stamping it into a tiny form factor used for like a cell phone pouch, leaving little tabs exposed for connecting the terminals to. My CNC machine was already going to have rollers on it. Now that you bring it up, yeah, I could have copper and aluminum sheets on rollers that feed through my CNC machine, and my CNC machine can paint on this paste. This paste could be kept in a sealed container and squeezed out and brushed as it's fed through. It could brush it on, and then I could have hair dryers after that blow it off to flash it off, and I need vacuums to suck that outside, so I don't get all the fumes. And yeah, I could make in that way, in a very automated fashion, my electrodes.
The flattened electrode is then cut into cell phone battery size pieces with the super sharp stamping machine.
Alright, so notice the tab on the aluminum, which you can solder to. This is single-sided aluminum coated in cathode paste. That's all I got to say about that. Oh, another thing of note is that aluminum is 60% as conductive as copper. So it is a conductor of electricity, but not the best. And then silver and gold are better than copper even. But note that the aluminum is always placed on the cathode side for a reason. If you were to put the copper on the cathode side and aluminum on the anode side, because of the redox reaction, or the reduction and oxidation of the corresponding sides, the different metals would fare poorly if they were swapped sides. So they're on a certain side for a reason based on the type of metal and what reactions happen.
Multiple electrode sheets.
Alright, they're not going to mention it, but it looks to me, here we go. See, that's a different color tab. This one's the cathode, and you can see the aluminum tab. This one's the anode, and you can see the copper tab. So that verifies what I said, but they never show the process of making this anode, and I feel that that's a mistake, and it leaves out a critical part of this, and they're not really explaining any of this stuff I'm adding, so I'm making this video a lot more educational by adding all of this information. But yeah, here's the copper. So I was right. This verifies everything. Good to know. Copper anode right there. Boom. They're going to stack copper anode with the aluminum cathode with their corresponding paste. Note that the cathode paste is darker than the anode paste. And note that the copper anode paste is very much like pencil lead, because that's basically the same stuff. The graphite powder is the same pencil gray.
Are stacked together like a super thin cake. Electrode sheets are stacked together like a super thin cake. Each layer separated by an insulating sheet.
Alright. That's very misleading. It's not an insulating sheet at all. It's called a separator, and it's a semi-porous membrane made of polypropylene and possibly a 3-layer polypropylene, polyethylene, and polypropylene. They're created with a certain stretching technique that creates micropores in it, and those pores are big enough to allow ion flow. But they can't be too big, otherwise they'd cause short-circuiting and cause certain during the chemical reaction, certain things would pass through that shouldn't be able to pass through. They have to be just the right size micropores. So this is not just an insulator. You can't just use a rubber glove. Now, for some homemade batteries for projects and stuff, some people can use paper towel or a napkin or various other things, which can work, but you really want to buy separator from the battery supplier that's made for this stuff. The separator from the battery supplier will be made such that if it were to get too hot and melt, it would actually cut off the whole reaction, separating the two sides, which is also a bonus. So that's why a plastic separator is created. It's a little bit of a stretchy, soft plastic, semi-permeable membrane. Yeah, so they're now stacking the cathode and anode facing one another, paste side to paste side, and then they're wrapping it around, I guess, one full revolution on top of that to create separation between the cathode and anode collectors and the outer pouch that they're going to end up putting this in.
Separated by an insulating sheet. And spit out of an automated stacking machine.
Alright, so note right here, you'll see the aluminum tab coming out, and you'll see the copper tab coming out. And like I said, the aluminum tab's the cathode, the copper tab is the anode, and those are now ready to be connected to your cell phone, however. Note that it's got a label on it. It might have been heat shrinked on here because it's even wrapping around the edges. So Yeah, it's had some processing done on it, which they haven't even explained or showed in any way. Okay, notice also there are 2 tabs of each color, 2 copper and 2 aluminum. So I have to assume the copper is facing downward, the aluminum is facing upward. No, I mean the aluminum is facing downward, the copper is facing upward as far as the paste. And then again, aluminum facing downward, copper facing upward. So there's basically 2 batteries in one. If you smash the tabs together, they'll be wired in parallel, which doubles the capacity. Alright, the pouch making. It looks like they put some type of black sleeve on the tops of the anode and cathode, attaching a new material to the tops of that. Because you can see the new material overlapping right here onto this copper tab. We don't know what this material is, but it's probably nickel. Nickel is commonly used for battery terminals. This pouch is probably laminated aluminum. They're going to vacuum seal it and probably cut it with an ultrasonic cutter slash sealer that's gonna like crimp it and seal it and melt it together, like almost weld it. Ultrasonic welder cutter? I don't know. That's my guess. During that process, see this black stuff has to be insulated, because this edge, if it weren't insulated, then you'd be shorting out these batteries. The copper would connect to the aluminum terminal and that'd short it out. So even though this is laminated, the risk of shorting would be too high. So they're making this black part has got to be like shrink wrap, probably electrical shrink wrap. Yeah, they probably just shrink wrapped a piece of nickel tape onto the terminal. Maybe it would be soldered and then shrink wrapped. They didn't show any of that. Now the question is, when they put this foil case on, will that adhere itself to the shrink wrap? Or will air be able to get in where the shrink wrap hits the foil? I'm sure that the bottom sides and the sides that they weld will all be completely sealed, but wouldn't that be a place where air could get in? My guess would be yes, that air could get in. I'm not sure how they could fully seal off that shrink wrap, because they're dissimilar materials. How do you weld rubber shrink wrap to coated aluminum in an airtight fashion? I don't see how they could do that. I don't think it's an anti-static suit he's wearing. I think it just prevents skin flakes and dust, just to keep the environment clean. They probably have HEPA air filters, keeping the dust content down, and you just cover your body and your hair and stuff to keep skin flakes. And I mean, skin flakes is what creates dust. To keep everything clean. I don't think a little bit of dust would hurt it, but it's unprofessional. And if you had like a hair inside the battery, I don't know, it's just not professional. They probably just want a professional product, but I don't think it would hurt the battery, really, in my opinion. Okay, so it's moisture resistant, but not waterproof. That sounded like some truth there. So what I'm thinking is that where this came together, it's not going to be waterproof. It's going to be smashed real snug and tight up to the shrink wrap connection, the black wrapper that was here, and which should be sticking out a little bit. It looks like you can kind of see it right here and here. But it's just a snug fit, the whole length of it, and it was vacuum sealed and crimped. It's possible that the inside of this whole sheet was actually coated in a sticky adhesive that's pressure sensitive. That's pretty likely that this whole aluminum sheet, the inside of it was pressure or heat activated glue, because it doesn't have that metallic shine. It looks like something was on here. So it's probably similar to this aluminum tape in that it's a tape. If you stick it together, then it's stuck. I'll show you. So this is aluminum tape, and you can stick it together. And since it's so thin and the glue is so fine, it probably would be fairly, well, not waterproof, but water resistant. Electronics can't be submerged in water anyways, and I think the phone case itself would be designed to encapsulate the battery and protect it with rubber seals where the battery compartment is. So I think that they don't have to really be worried about it being entirely waterproof. They'll just get it nice and tight and snug around these shrink wrap connections that they have right here. Nice and snug around that, and just press it real firm, getting out any air. And oh yeah, you can see the electrical shrink wrap does stick out. You can see it in this frame. I paused it at the right moment. You can see it sticking out just a little bit. And so in the gaps between this glued aluminum sheet, you'll definitely have the ability for water to get in through here. That's not going to be watertight. Maybe if you caulked around it in addition or something, I don't know. But it's just, whatever glue is on this aluminum is just sticking real well to that rubber. And I mean, I think it'd be fairly water resistant though. They want to keep moisture out because the one thing that you cannot have get onto the cathode paste is water. That's the one thing. It can be exposed to air, but if you get it exposed to water, I think that will react. Possibly burst into flames. But I'm not positive on that, I'm just pretty sure. So, for making flat packs, you're going to need, or gel packs you could call it, you're going to need large sheets of aluminum with adhesive applied. And you'll need to just press it in real firm on the edges and try to get out all air. And you should be good to go. Now, the adhesive on the aluminum, I don't know, it could be anything. You could just use this aluminum tape, I imagine, and just layer it, multiple layers. This has already got adhesive on it. You can buy this from any hardware store. It's like tape used for taping ductwork or something in your house for HVAC stuff. So you could just put multiple layers of that since it's already got a nice adhesive on it. But yeah, with my additional explanation and telling you exactly how to make the anode and cathode paste, I think that will help a lot. Now I feel like we didn't talk enough about the electrolyte layer. So the separator, which is applied here, is a semi-permeable membrane, but it also needs to have electrolyte applied to it. Now, this is the way you make that electrolyte. Alright, the electrolyte used for lithium-ion batteries, which is to permeate the separator layer, which is the sandwich of polypropylene, polyethylene, and polypropylene, or it could be a formation with only a single layer of polypropylene. And it will be, oh, the brand is CellGuard. So you just Google CellGuard, and that's how you buy it. Tri-layer is the best one for NMC and NCA batteries, which are the kind used for electric cars. The electrolyte is most likely going to be lithium hexafluorophosphate, LiPF6, which is a lithium salt powder. Comes in powder form, and this combined with organic solvents. Now, the organic solvents, I wasn't able to find what organic solvents are used for secondary batteries, which are rechargeable, and it's very important you have the right ones. But I didn't need to figure that out because you can buy your LiPF6 electrolyte solution pre-mixed with solvents from raw battery materials providers. So you buy it as a ready-to-go liquid form, and you just squeeze it, however many drops of it, maybe like 8 drops onto a battery of this size, onto the separator layer. Now I think they do show squeezing those drops on in this video. I could have sworn. Okay, look. So even though they did crimp this package around it, they're going to open up the top and apply the electrolyte solution now. So it must not have been that good of a glue if they're opening it up again now. Maybe it's not even glued. Okay, so they just opened it up. It's a little unclear what's going on here. Maybe they opened it from the bottom because I don't see the electrical tabs. So maybe this side is fully glued or whatever. But then this side, well, this side was folded over. Ah! They must have cut it right here. So they left just an air pouch here. They cut it right here, and then you can grab the two sides of this, which are sticking out after you cut this in half in this direction. You can grab the two sides and pull it apart, giving access to pour the electrolyte solution in from this direction. So these are all sealed. This is sealed. This is sealed. But this becomes unsealed. And they'll have to reseal this after. So that's why that's there. I wondered what that was for. Alright, so they cut it and they pulled it apart, and now they're injecting the electrolyte. Let's see how much they put in. And like I said, you buy the electrolyte pre-mixed, but it's a lithium salt of a special formula, lithium hexafluorophosphate. And that's used for most lithium-ion battery electrolyte solutions. For various different lithium compounds as the cathode. When you hear of lithium iron phosphate battery, that's describing the chemical compound of the cathode. If you hear NMC or nickel metal cobalt oxide or whatever, or nickel, lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt oxide, NMC, that's referring to the cathode compound for that type of battery. So the name of the battery is always the compound of the cathode. But the anode, being graphite / carbon, is the same across all different chemistries of batteries, and the electrolyte is always the same. And the cathode being copper, the anode being aluminum as the metallic collector is always the same. Those things don't change. Alright, so you can verify I was right here. Although, okay, I thought they cut it right here and used this little air pouch to grab and open it. I was wrong there. They opened it all the way from the end. Note how this folded in half part right here is sealed, and this sealed side is staying sealed. So they did ultrasonically weld these two halves together, or there's a glue here, but there wasn't a glue in this part, only a glue along this strip about 1 centimeter thick. So that's interesting. But they'll need to glue this off or roll this up or something to seal off this edge to make it waterproof. Okay, so he's using a dropper tool. So I guess he pinches some rubber piece, dips it in electrolyte, and then opens that up. Or you can see the electrolyte tube is right here, or it's just a piece of glass or plastic that he just dips in and then he just counts the number of drops. Maybe there isn't a tube that you put in and you let go and it sucks it up. I'm not sure. I imagine it's probably the suck up kind though. Let's see if he squeezes his fingers together. 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop, 5 drop, 6 drop, 7 drop, 8 drop, 9 drop. Oh, so he weighed it. Interesting. He weighed it, and then he pressed tare or whatever, which set it back to 0. And now he measures it out in grams. So he's not counting the drops. He's counting the weight of the electrolyte. That's interesting. I wonder, like, I don't know how you'd find out what weight is the appropriate weight for electrolyte. They must have done a lot of testing to get that information. I guess you'd just have to guess. That's tough. I mean, can you have too much? I don't know. They don't even show how much they put in. That sucks. Because I'd want to know, like, how much electrolyte. It's too bad. I guess we can guess it was 2 grams, though.
The battery pouch is placed in a vacuum box where all...
Alright, this is important. By putting the battery pouch in a vacuum box, it's going to suck out all air. But just like when they make a carbon fiber snowboard, they apply the epoxy to the carbon fiber sheets, but then in order to smash the epoxy and have it permeate the carbon fiber well, they put it into a vacuum sealer bag, and it presses, and the carbon fiber can be fully permeated with the epoxy. So they're using the same exact principle here to really press everything, vacuum seal it, so that that electrolyte they dripped in the top gets all dispersed throughout the semi-permeable separator membrane layer, because they want it to be well spread out between the anodes and cathodes everywhere.
All the remaining air is sucked out, allowing the electrolyte to soak into the electrode. A few minutes.
Okay, so it was vacuum sealed. Not powerful enough to crush this completely. Oh, it looks like right here it was somehow crimp sealed, like a glue is applied. You see how it's kind of flatter right here? So I don't know, maybe that has been sealed off. This looks like it's sealed, this looks like it's sealed, and it looks like it's sealed right here. And then this side was the side that was rolled up.
Later, the battery is finished.
Yeah, it does look like it was sealed right here. I wonder if this type of aluminum has a pressure sensitive glue, and they just stamp it real hard with pressure, and that's what sealed it. It's gotta be, right? And then by pressing real hard on this rubber, actually the rubber forms a rubber seal. If you press rubber against metal and metal, that creates an airtight seal. That's how gaskets are, like in your air conditioning system of your car. When you screw something on, the rubber compresses, and then that forms an airtight seal. Same with faucets or anything else. So that's interesting. So the shrink wrap rubber actually, if put under a great deal of pressure, actually would seal off the place where these terminals are exiting. So that is fascinating. That's got to be what happened. It's just pressed real tight. Might actually be waterproof. Alright, now it looks like it was cut on either side. So that's a change. They must have pressure sealed. Yeah, they must have put in another machine that pushes down hard and cuts it. But also, if it's pressure sensitive glue, it would seal off all the edges one final time and then cut for a neat look like this.
Isn't ready. Hard yet. Union now took experimental batteries to test out new promising materials. In addition to lithium ion, our future phones and cars could be powered by sulfur, sodium, or even air.
Alright, this capacity is 1 amp hour, 3.7 volts. .7 volts is on the high end of a single cell. Because lithium iron phosphate batteries, I believe, are 3.3 volts. So 3.7 is high. 1 amp hour. Notice how he rolled up these sharp edges that were stamped. He just rolled them upward. Probably on both sides. So they look all smooth now. And then they put, it looks like just a printed label paper. They just printed out the stuff and just put it on there. Nothing too fancy there. Normally, like, commercial batteries will put a PVC layer, I believe, shrink wrapped, of like fancy logos and stuff. would that be? I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. Because somebody that would want to take this video and learn how to make a battery themselves, and this information I'm giving helping them along the way, I don't think they would care about labeling so much if it's just for home use.
To find out how well the new materials work, PNNL puts their experimental batteries through the ringer, repeatedly charging and discharging them in these test beds.
Well, there you go. If you're going to be running tons and tons of tests, I guess one of the things they might be doing is trying different amounts of electrolyte and seeing which batteries perform the best over a long period of time so that they can perfect how much electrolyte to add. I don't think there'd be a whole lot of experimentation you can actually do with, well, maybe also the thickness of the paste for the anode cathode paste, but like those pastes are pretty much like they are what they are. There's not a whole lot you can do. I mean, you buy them pre-made.
Where the batteries are exposed to
And I doubt most battery manufacturers actually make their own lithium compounds. Well, maybe they do, but that's like hardcore chemistry, and I'm not interested in getting into the hardcore chemistry of making lithium, cobalt, manganese oxide. Like, no thank you. That's probably very involved. But maybe someday I will get to that level. Maybe you can even save more costs by just buying lithium ingots and doing a whole chemistry project just to make that final cathode compound. It might be a lot cheaper, I don't know.
green heat and cold.
This lithium-ion battery has been tested for more than 500 cycles, and it's still working great. Maybe one day you will achieve a top video game score, or drive your car across the country with a battery like this.
Okay. So now that video with my commentary should do some actual justice. And actually be more helpful.